Good evening. My name is Ozzy Arewale, Associate at BDP Quadrangle and Chair of the ULI Toronto Urban Leadership Program. ULI Toronto Urban Leadership Program is an annual curriculum-based program designed to immerse mid-career professionals from different disciplines in Toronto city building to create positive change in our city. The program is sponsored by BDP Quadrangle in memory of its founding partner, Brian L. Curtner. The program reflects many of Brian's passions, including city building, mentorship, and collaboration. Our mission is to cultivate thought and industry leadership by immersing engaging leaders in real estate and land use industry in the challenges and opportunities of developing the Greater Toronto area and the Greater Golden Horseshoe area. This year, the Curtner program took to its focus placemaking and placekeeping. And once again, our leadership cohort embarked on a remarkable journey to explore, challenge, and elevate this topic. This evening's webinar will offer a peek into what we learned. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge ULI Toronto's annual sponsors. Today's event and all other ULI programming would not be possible without the support of our annual sponsors, and we would like to thank them for their support. Now, more than ever, ULI Toronto relies on the support of sponsors to put high quality programs and to drive our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact communities worldwide. To all of our annual sponsors, thank you. It is now my honor and great pleasure to introduce Kevin Stolaric, the Dean of the Curtner Urban Leadership Program. Over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Ozzy. Welcome, everyone. I'll kind of just quickly will kick off. The teams are going to present information for each team coordinated one session during the past several months. And so they're all going to kind of summarize those a little bit. And then also I've asked them all to pick a place somewhere in the Toronto area that, and talk about how they would approach placemaking for that place. So not really developing a plan, but really talking more about the process and how they would approach it based on what we've done over the past several months. One of the things that we did talk about, and it'll be the third team to present, actually focused on placekeeping. And along with that, they have developed, I would say, an approach to the land acknowledgement that they really wanted to share with everyone and that we wanted to use tonight as our land acknowledgement. So I'm handing it over to Matt Andrews to do that.
Super. Thanks very much, Kevin. Today, we offer a land and water acknowledgement to recognize the impacts that our industry has on the environment, places, and people who inhabit them, not only now, but for generations past and future, and to pursue reconciliation and truth through actively engaging, listening, and acknowledging the needs of the communities that we work in. As professionals in fields related to placemaking, land use, and development, it is essential that in all the work we do, we recognize that these lands and water that we are working, meeting, and living on are within the dish with one spoon territory and is home to many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and that these lands are now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have stewarded the land for generations. We also recognize that the work we do within these lands are covered by treaties and agreements such as Treaty 13 and the Two-Row Wampum, and that we must work to understand and honor them. As a new parent myself, I'm experiencing the parental feelings of care and responsibility and acknowledge the importance of making sure that we do everything we can to ensure that the land and environment we live and work in continues to be a safe, joyful, and inclusive place for all our children and future generations to enjoy and share. It is also important for us to consider our own connection and appreciation of the land and water and what they give us, and to understand our own and others' histories as a diverse group of settlers, immigrants, and newcomers in this and generations past. We also acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, and particularly those who are descended from those brought here through enslavement. This land acknowledgement is a commitment to allyship, to disrupt oppressive and traditionally colonial spaces, and to commit to educating ourselves and others about the histories of marginalized peoples, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and establishing meaningful relationships built on trust with and respect for these communities through our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And as I said, we are recording the session, and we will have the slides for everybody, and I will also make sure to get the text of that from Matt. So Matt, please remember to send me the text, so that we have, because I know we've adopted it from some others that we've been doing as well. And one of the things that I will say that we've heard quite a bit, and I think every time we had a session, we did a different land acknowledgement as each team kind of thought about it and thought about what it meant. But one of the important things that we have heard many times is the importance of really kind of personalizing the acknowledgement as a way of understanding, right, and reflecting on, right, that it really is meant to be a pause for reflection, and so it's important that it's not just rote. So thank you for that, Matt, and the rest of Team 4. And I said I'm gonna make sure we share that with everybody. So the other thing, that we're not going to really talk about tonight, but obviously we wanted to talk about a little bit, was most of, I say about 2/3 of the people in the program were able to a couple of weeks ago, or 1 week ago, really, I guess it was, but we went to Montreal, obviously, from the picture, and where else could you be to have the biosphere behind you? And we really looked at, and we spent the weekend there. A special thanks to the people at LeMay, who helped host and provided all kinds of both really interesting panels and engagement, and the what I have now dubbed the death mark of a walking tour, but it was really, really good, even though we got in about 35,000 steps, I think was the last count. But we got to see an awful lot of the city in a lot of really interesting ways, and learned an awful lot about placemaking in Montreal and what works there and why, and even some of what doesn't and why. And so it was a tremendous opportunity and additional experience for us as well, to be able to share in that. So we wanted to at least mention it and, you know, brag a little bit, because hey, we all got to go to Montreal. So and you know, and if you know people that are presenting and then they went, please talk to them about it. We have had many long conversations since, and probably have many more in the future about this. So just wanted to mention it. So as I said, the teams are presenting for about 20 minutes. We will, as always with ULI, start and end on time, right? So the teams themselves are just going to go. They'll kind of take control as they did. What I said, what the teams did for this is each team had a month where they had a particular topic, and they will and they presented that and information and panels and provided. We were doing, we mostly were still Zoom sessions just because of what's been going on. So we're kind of, I always call them long half days. And so both workshops and group activities and other things. So it wasn't just, you know, talking heads for 5 hours. But a lot of really interesting stuff. And so I've asked all of the teams to kind of, again, present not so much I didn't want book reports, but more to talk about some of the kind of interesting and more surprising things that they discovered in discussing their topics, and putting the material together, and what they learned from the panels if they had them, and other things. I will say team 2, which was at the end of April, also included, we got Ken Greenberg in, and he did a walking tour with us in Corktown Commons. And talked about the development of that particular property, as well as some of the other stuff that's going on at the waterfront, from an environment and sustainability position, but also obviously talking about placemaking. And so it was a really great opportunity. I will say also in Montreal, both Ken and Paul Bedford joined the group for the Montreal tour as well. So we got to spend time with them on the train and in Montreal, and that was really great as well. So Oh, okay. So with that, I said the order they're going to talk about the placemaking process, which was the basic process, and then the it's kind of unexpected placemaking, placekeeping, and the environmental issues. So it goes over to team 3. I don't know who's. You're all going to see team 3 now. So.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to see all of you today in the town hall. So in the next 20 minutes or so, our team will start with the key takeaways and summary from the January session, and then we'll move on to the case study for the place called Fox of the Don in Don Valley, Toronto, and focus on the placemaking framework that includes the site and context, opportunities and constraints, stakeholder engagement, as well as the placemaking strategies. So first of all, let me introduce the team. So our team has 7 people coming from diverse background. We have Ben from Take Economy Research. We have Isaiah from TAS, Michael from City of Brampton, Rini from Reserve Properties, next, Stephen from Urban Strategies. Yeah, can we move on to the next slide, please? Thanks. Stephen from Urban Strategies, Shan Lee, myself from City of Toronto, and Shan Yang from B&H Architects. Next. So as you may recall, we had engaging conversations back in January. We have the team presentation and activities following by the panel discussions and the breakout group discussions. So we invited 4 experts from different fields, including public policies and programs, public art and murals, public engagement, as well as the business operations to provide further insights on the monthly topic. So in the presentation, we talk about the matters that relate to the life cycle of places, focusing on 3 main perspectives: the dimension of place, the champion of place, and the life cycle of the place. So we started by asking the question, how to define a place? We know the place could be defined by its size, by the programming of the place, by the uses, or by the ownership. So places that matter can be new, can be old. They can exist in both public and private realm. But are there any limits on what can be considered a place? Next. So place can be in a continuous cycle of change involving decline and revival. A lot of places that matter exist beyond the public consciousness and were never designed or planned. So we raised the open-ended question by asking what our role is in keeping all these places, changing them, or remaking them. Next. So in the second part, we talk about whom the placemakers are during a typical placemaking process and what a meaningful placemaking process could look like. A placemaking process involving like competing interests. How can we ensure the visions for the public spaces are equally valid? Next. So we emphasize the importance of the equity in the placemaking process. So placemaking is about having a sense of ownership of a space and whom should be included. The process requires collaboration and a unified vision and ongoing communications. It should be creative and give the priority to the people from the equity-seeking groups. So placemaking is a process that continues to evolve. A good placemaking process fosters community involvement and ownership and supports long-term development and generates avenue over time. So after the place is formed, what is the process to keep it and make it sustainable and resilient? We know the goal of the placekeeping is to create a high quality, sustainable space which is valued by the users who want to visit it again and again. A placekeeping is a long-term process, and it starts at the very beginning of the process when the place is created. Placemaking can happen and occur from time to time within the entire life cycle of a place. It can be considered as a creation of a place and a renewal or regeneration of a place, which ultimately achieve the goal of the sustainability. So in January, we also talk a bit about the dimensions of placekeeping. It is a long-term management process of a space that includes maintenance, governance, evaluation, and funding that should be considered and contemplated when the space is created. So I think this is a quick summary of the January sessions, and then now I'll pass on to the rest of the group to talk about the case study for the Forks of Dawn in Don Valley, Toronto.
So the Forks of the Dawn is where we selected for our case study. I'm going to provide a brief overview of where it's located and some of the history of the area, and then we'll get into some of the stakeholder engagement stuff. So the Forks of the Dawn, it's located in the city of Toronto. It's along the Dawn River, which runs from the Oak Ridges Moraine in the north down to Lake Ontario in the south. It's at the intersection of 3 major trail networks. So it connects a lot of different communities and then runs south down towards the city of Toronto, down towards downtown Toronto. Some of the neighborhoods in the surrounding area, there's Thorncliffe Park and Flemington Park to the north. These are high density mixed use areas that are very diverse and home to a lot of new Canadians. And then in the south, there's Old East York and Parkview Hill, which are lower density single detached houses. There's 2 main business parks in the surrounding area, Leaside Business Park and O'Connor Business Area. And so some of these employees also use this trail network. This map here shows some of the existing conditions of the area. So it shows Don Mills Road to the west and the Don Valley Parkway to the east. And what it really highlights is kind of the complexity of this site, where all these different trails intersect, as well as intersecting with Don Mills Road. You can see the access there. And so it's connecting all these different communities, and it's a bit challenging from the perspective of wayfinding. And as it is right now, there hasn't been a lot of investment in terms of landscaping and placemaking in this area. So it's really a great opportunity for the future. In terms of existing amenities, there's a couple of benches, a parking lot, 2 public art installations. One of them is the elevated wetlands, which we'll talk about a bit later, but anyone who's drove down the Don Valley Parkway would know what they look like. The picture was on our title slide as well. They're those funky sculptures with green space kind of on top of them. And then there's just a bike rental rack within that open area. So there's really not much in terms of amenities in this area right now. So for any placemaking plan, we have to also look at the history of the area and understand it. So for the future, you would do an in-depth look at the history of this area, but we'll just provide a quick brief summary of some of the key points. So human settlement in this area dates back as far as 7,000 years ago. It was a valuable asset to a lot of different indigenous groups. They used it to make pottery, constructed longhouses on the river when it became a staple, when corn became a staple for food. And then in 1787, with the Toronto Purchase, the land now known as Toronto was surrendered to the British. And that's when this process of urbanization began. So the river was straightened in the 1880s to accommodate industrial development in the Portlands. And then the construction of the Don Valley Parkway in the 1960s had a lot of significant impacts on the topography and the ecology of the area. So this process of urbanization and the straightening of the Don had a lot of different impacts on the valley and a lot of negative impacts on the ecology, such as flooding and pollution.
Shan, you're on mute.
Can everyone hear me now? Okay, perfect. Yep. Along with the site inventory and history, we have also identified the site opportunities and the constraints. So for the opportunities, firstly, we all know that the site is situated within the ravine system, surrounded by ample of green space. There are diverse existing natural habitats, including grassland, forest, wetlands, riverbank, with a lot of native plants and animals. Secondly, the site has trail connections to multiple communities around, as previously mentioned by Ben, including Flemington Park, East York, Songcliffe Park. And thirdly, there are amazing views from adjacent residential towers. And the site supports year-round recreational activities. And you can see people cycling, running, walking in all seasons. It got extremely popular during the pandemic. And also there are educational opportunities with the diverse ecosystems and interesting site history. And there are existing attractions as this art installation, the elevated wetland, which makes people lingering around. However, on the other hand, there are lots of constraints of the site as well. It is a busy traffic node, as mentioned previously. Vehicle traffic is quite fast on Don Mills Road, and lots of noise from the highway and the rail track. The existing habitat is quite sensitive, and they need a lot of careful protection and maintenance. There's also seasonal flooding affecting the site, and nighttime safety is always a concern. The area underneath the bridge gets very dark. And there's also limited amenity given that it's a popular spot for people to stop and take a break. And lastly, lack of winter maintenance, which discourages people using the site in the cold weather.
So one of the things we thought of with everything we've told you so far is the forks in the road. How do we create meaningful engagements? Sorry, one sec. How do we create meaningful engagement opportunities to capture the wants and needs of current users, potential users, and future stewards, which play a role in stewardship of the land? Next slide. So the standard engagement spectrum is more about us telling people what they want rather than listening to people and telling them and engaging them. So this active engagement framework is kind of making it more accessible to people, creating that low barrier to access where we can get input from a diverse groups. Next slide. So existing users that we've determined for this area, cyclists and joggers. So their primary users can be commuters, cycling groups or individuals using the current trails for fitness. Pedestrians, the primary users just for leisure walks, families, groups, and individuals. Local stewardship groups such as Friends of the Don East, Heritage Toronto, Don't Mess with the Don, and people experiencing homelessness, which has led to a number of encampments in that area. Now, if we look at potential users, we move on to new Canadians. As my colleagues have mentioned, there's a number of communities that have a number of new Canadians residing there. Schools, school children through school programs, day camps, after school clubs. Overflow from the brickworks and other neighboring green spaces that may not realize the Forks of the Don exists or is accessible to them. And the festival arts communities, basically creating that photo-worthy destination for users. That leads us into future stewards. So community groups such as the Thorncliffe Park Women's Committee, Don't Mess with the Don, school and school children through school programs, day camp, or after school clubs, creating that bond to the place that will encourage others to care and carry it forward. Next slide. So I called this Empowering the Powerless. Existing user engagement, so kiosks on existing trails to educate on the existing space and solicit for input. As we've identified, there's a lack of amenities. So fill stations, repair stations, year-round washrooms, lighting, emergency call buttons, curated bike, walking, hiking tours with guides that can get the creative juices flowing in the space to see what is possible. Self-guided tours for specific demographics via an app. So commuter trails, leisure trails, adventure trails, family routes, all with the goal of getting a survey at the end to engage future users. And that goal is to expand the perceived notion of the existing space and activate it in new ways, with the end benefit being the users feeling empowered by potential rather than working in the constraints of what's there. Now, potential user engagement, this is a little trickier, but that's where we build in community partnerships. So local community partnerships for food events, food at the fork, state camps for kids, scavenger, adventure hunts, storytelling, ghost stories, campfire stories, photo contests, partnering with Indigenous and shelters to gather input from marginalized and vulnerable populations that do use that space. And again, creating that low barrier to access and ultimately making those that feel they don't have a voice feel empowered and willing to engage in the space to kind of move this use forward.
Thanks so much, Renee. Now we're going to actually get into some of the placemaking strategies, and Stephen's going to share a bunch of sort of exciting ideas that we had around that. But first, we wanted to make sure that it was sort of highlighted here the importance of prioritizing community support and services. The area does have a population of unhoused folks, and really we wanted to make sure that before we started considering interesting activations and murals and different projects like that, what are some of the organizations that we would make sure that we work with to provide support where it's really needed most. So a few quick examples, one would being the Works, which is an organization actually within the city of Toronto itself, really focused on harm reduction, focused on, instead of battling this sort of war on drug use, but actually how to create safe, clean spaces for folks to live their life, and really sort of use drugs if that's their choice in a safe, clean, sterile sort of space. Fred Victor Center, really centered around supporting underhoused and homeless populations across the city. The Anishinaabe Health Toronto, focused on providing support and healthcare, really centered in Indigenous cultures and traditions, so using Western medicine as well, but really focused on traditional Indigenous supports. And then Street Health, which you see an image of on the right there. One example of the support they offer is a mobile bus that will travel around the city, providing different services to underhoused and homeless populations in need. Just a few quick examples. I give shout out to Renee for finding these examples of other ways that placemaking can also provide a tangible benefit. So Rain City Housing and Spring Advertising out west collaborated on these modified public benches. Looking at temporary hand washing stations, how could some of these things provide this community benefit, we said, but also function as art? Next slide, please. And then just who could we collaborate with on some of the other items that Stephen's going to be going to next. So again, as far as the city goes, working with their Indigenous Affairs Office, Street Art Toronto, Conservation Authority, protecting the land that we're on, community partners, the Don Valley Art Club, Art Spin, Friends of the East Don. Like, it's a very active community that really cares about what happens in spaces. So we'd want to work with them. And then as far as executing some of the different projects that we're about to go through, Steps Public Art, 880 Cities, Artscape Atelier, and Sheep are all some really great studios that are doing amazing work around town. Stephen.
So I think we're running out of the clock, but I'll just quickly run through in about a minute some of our strategies that we kind of spitballed and brainstormed together, where they're kind of focused initially on site improvements and furnishing, and then some ideas for both community and private partnerships. So the idea of hard landscaping, some planting or seeding, maybe this is a place in the Don Valley where you can start to have a slightly more formal kind of place that for people to gather. Some ideas for potentially screening or dealing with the Don Valley Parkway, just acknowledging that noise and pollution could potentially be an issue. The idea of just a cycling roundabout or some real cycling improvements to make it, to reduce the chance of the likelihood of collisions between cyclists and pedestrians. Potential pavilions as meeting places, meet me at this place, would really help give some specific place to the Forks of the Don. Basic things like public washrooms and water refill stations, because there aren't a lot in the Don Valley. Wildlife resistant garbage and recycling bins, to just acknowledge that people are there as well as wildlife. Experiential lighting or design elements to both provide lighting, but in a passive way to acknowledge wildlife. Bike repair stations, acknowledging there's so many cyclists pass through here. Maybe there's fun ways of integrating public art and cycling infrastructure. Wayfinding, maybe special wayfinding or creative wayfinding and signage. Acknowledging the homeless population and the people who may be in need and some resources that could potentially help them or support them. A community-led medicine garden or sculpture area. Indigenous art collaborations as a potential opportunity. Playful signage or art by partnering with the community. Activations, events, and community storytelling. Modular temporary shelters. Pop-up cafes, restaurants, or bike rentals. And even maybe say something like a seasonal beer garden or a cafe. So I know I went over the time a little bit, so I will pass it over.
Thank you. I know there's always so much, and I'm like, oh, you did a good job. Good rushing, good quick rushing at the end. So thank you all. Like I said, we're going to share the slides with everything from everybody too, so people have a chance to spend a little more time and absorb. So if you want to go back and look at some of this stuff again, so there's a lot of great ideas there for sure. Okay, team one, you're up.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
That is a yes, thanks. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Astrid Greaves. Our group consists of Abby Carr, Alex Fernew, Joaquin Civillano, Kelsey Carrier, Nadel Machu, and Roxy Shield, and we were tasked with exploring unconventional placemaking. In today's presentation, we will provide a brief overview of unconventional placemaking, as well as how the model can and has been applied to projects within the urban realm. Next, we will explore how these approaches could be applied to the redevelopment of the Lower Junction Triangle in Toronto. Most of us are familiar with conventional processes for placemaking. That is a top-down and often rigid method in which government and developers typically take the lead on the process. However, in exploring more unconventional models for placemaking, we were faced with the question, how much of our understanding and experience of place is derived from conventional city building? Do people's experience of a place, as we see on the conventional map to the left, as a series of roads, buildings, and green space? Or do people experience a place more like the mental maps on the right, where certain experiences, memories, and places end up being more significant? Therein lies the transformative potential of more unconventional forms of placemaking and placekeeping, such as tactical urbanism. Tactical urbanism is an approach to community building using short-term, low-cost, and scalable projects intended to catalyze long-term change. In comparison to conventional placemaking, tactical urbanism is smaller in scale. It looks to more inexpensive, minimally funded, simple solutions with quick implementation. The projects are community-led, and the process is not necessarily linear. Rather, it is cyclical, and used to test ideas, bring people together, and identify a common goal, employing incremental changes as the spark for more significant permanent changes. Tactical urbanism employs pilot projects, pop-ups, and collaborations. The outcomes of tactical urbanism are on a shorter time frame, with community taking a more active approach with direct involvement in decision-making. With tactical urbanism, the government's role would typically be more of a supporting role in comparison to conventional placemaking. Tactical urbanism provides community members with more autonomy and control over decision-making than various types of conventional consultation methods. Central to types of unconventional placemaking is the idea of experimentation, as captured by Jamie Lerner. The idea that action should only be taken after all of the answers and the resources have been found is a sure recipe for paralysis. The planning of a city is a process that allows for corrections. It is supremely arrogant to believe that planning can be done only after every variable has been controlled. We have already seen the necessitation and the transformative potential of experimentation as a result of the pandemic in Toronto through programs such as Cafe TO and Active TO. There are movements to formalize unconventional placemaking models, such as through lighter, quicker, cheaper, which boasts the ability to create and test projects immediately with less investment. There is also Gale Studio's action-oriented planning tools, which recommend an iterative process of measuring, testing, and refining. Unconventional placemaking and placekeeping can be in the form of a grassroots animation of underutilized space in playful and innovative ways, such as Toronto's BLOOR Beach, or it can be a bit more formalized through employing artists to extend the use of places in underutilized seasons, such as the beach's winter station. It can mean exploring the temporary redistribution of space, which has resulted in more formalized and permanent right-sizing of streets and public plazas, such as the Lakeview Lincoln Hub in Chicago or NYC DOT's Plaza program. It can be exploring models for neighborhood revitalization, employing as opposed to displacing vulnerable and unhoused community members, such as in Le Papinier's Garden Gemelin. It can be using temporary and permanent public art as a means to draw interest to a place, as we saw in the Create Your Path program for the West Toronto RailPath. And this leads us to our exploration of applying unconventional placemaking methodologies to the Lower Junction Triangle redevelopment. And at this point, I'll pass it over to Kelsey.
Thanks, Astrid. So our group dove deeply into a really dynamic and quickly developing neighborhood in the Lower Junction between Bloor and Dundas, and sort of nestled between the two railway tracks with Sterling Road going down the middle. A lot of you will probably know it as the site of the Museum of Contemporary Art. It's a long-standing and dynamic mixed-use neighborhood that has been the home to a very dynamic and creative community for generations and is undergoing rapid development. So we wanted to look at a modern and contemporary site as a way of applying all of the incredible learnings that we've undertaken through this project. So if we switch to the next slide, you'll see that this site has it's currently mixed use, including the Nestle Chocolate Factory, the Henderson Brewing Company, as well as several studios and independent businesses, as well as several residents and artist and performing studios. Slated for the development itself is upcoming commercial and office use, as well as residential and several condominiums. So as we look ahead on the next slide, we'll see that the city has developed an area plan and planning framework for the area that over the last several years has been diving deeply into exploring what's currently existing in the area, and has really earmarked priorities for managing the heights of buildings, the heritage buildings that should be maintained, as well as the built structure for the entire area. And they've done consultations with the community, but what we learned from sort of reviewing the community engagement around this development site is that the focus for the development has provided precious little planning policy to apply to ensure that the current residents of the area have a way of staying in the area as the neighborhood develops. So what we see is if you were to look at the site as a developer currently, you might look at this and see, a single story hodgepodge of uses and great opportunity to redevelop. But if you look more closely, you'll see that what the site currently contains is a beautiful ecosystem of organic uses, including a lemonade stand where children engage with their community. In the back left corner, raw space is a performing studio used by many of the residents who also live in the buildings. There's studios of manufacturers, artists, sculptors, performers. you name it. And that through the development of this neighborhood, all of these folks are actually being displaced from the community. And we've failed to apply any municipal planning tools or engage partners to ensure that the community that has inspired the artistic redevelopment and investment in this neighborhood was maintained. So if we look ahead to the next slide, we see that the community that's there are active placemakers. They're performing in public space, they're building public space, engaging with it on a regular basis, and really sort of drawing that idea of investment and engagement with the space itself. But what we really wanted to explore with our highlighting of this site is the idea that we can accidentally, through gentrification, through development, displace the same energy that made a place worth investing in. We can lose that original residents. So lastly, before I pass it off to our next crew, if you flip the slide ahead, just to say that we're focused on maintaining the cultural and artistic vibrancy of these communities and exploring the tools that we can use to do so.
So one way to ensure that the community remains vibrant is to make sure that placemaking does not come at placekeeping's expense. Next. So grassroots placemaking has helped make the Lower Junction Triangle a desirable place, and placemaking without a recognition for placekeeping risks severing the connections to experiences, histories, relationships already created by the established community. Next. So we'd like to support the existing placemaking initiatives that are already on site, and we're going to go through those in just a second, but a little bit to the point that we were making in the past slide, placemaking at placekeeping's expense kind of represents a colonial interpretation of space that values what might be, in the eyes of the colonizer, as greater than what currently exists. So like in Kelsey's great image that was sort of exemplified there. So there exists an extractive relationship in the transformation of a space when a place is deemed desirable based on the sweat equity placemaking of established communities. So a new place forged through redevelopment without the opportunity for people to authentically place keep their community interactions and livelihoods may lead to a less vibrant and stale version of place. Next. So people power. The Lower Junction Triangle has a vibrant community already. Next. One of the community organizations that exist on site that's doing really amazing things is the West Toronto RAILPATH. This is a volunteer group who advises stakeholders like the City of Toronto, Metrolinx, other resident groups as well. So this group is made up of cyclists, artists, planners, urban ecologists, landscape architects, fresh air fiends, avid walkers. Together, the Friends are committed to expanding and protecting and improving the West Toronto RAILPATH. One of the really cool things that they did, which I thought was quite unique, was create a neighborhood seed bank of existing plants to be replanted after construction. So that ensures for like ecological continuity on the site. And all the phases of the project can then benefit from the inclusion of the plants that already made it kind of a cool, active pollinator space. The organization of volunteers has also created an environmental stewardship plan, so future residents and caretakers can build upon the knowledge that has already been created. And this is paired with a yearly stewardship walk as well. The organization is kind of an umbrella organization that liaises a whole bunch of groups, and they've worked with Derail, which is an arts organization which commissions and produces place-specific art in order to create conversation about space. When I first stumbled upon this site, I didn't know what it was, but I looked at all of the art that was there and it blew me away. I was trying to figure it all out, piece it together. Was this intentional? Was this there before? It created a sense of mystery and community that kept me coming back to the spot to investigate it further. And it did create kind of a love of place for me in that site. So that was really, really important. And kind of unrelated to the West Toronto Railpath, but a really important part of what community groups are doing is to make sure that they have space that's represented, that they can be represented in, such as the George Chevallo Community Center that's on site. And it's named after a local resident. And it kind of serves as an extension of people's homes. You can access food there, social assistance programs, as well as a rent out space for whatever you need and whatever the community needs. Next. So a broader vision of sustainability is required. What's happening on site right now has really good examples of physical implementation of sustainability. For example, the timber frame buildings that are proposed, really neat initiatives happening there. However, there is a more complete picture to be explored. Next. Of course, we need to sustain community in order for things to be sustainable truly. So the current redevelopment has been criticized for the displacement of artists. One of the things that could have been implemented, for example, is an artist relocation plan. This is akin to a resident relocation plan and would help artists transition their space to other communities while the redevelopment is happening.
Thanks, Joaquin. And to expand on the broader approach to sustainability and sustainable development, we know that it is important and vital to our neighborhoods to sustain the cultural vibrancy and of our neighborhoods. But then it is inevitable to run into this ancient debate of, is development, for lack of better terms, good or bad for the character of our neighborhoods? And the main culprit, or the oversimplification of the culprit, is that we want to improve neighborhoods to make them better places for the people who live there now, but also for the the newcomers and new residents. And then by virtue, as a byproduct of improving the neighborhoods and making them more appealing and inviting more demand and competition and residents, etc., change is inevitable. That it could lead to driving up the prices and some form of displacement. Now, the challenge is, how can we handle that? I think a better approach, or the more the approach that we can all agree on, that could bridge the gap between the naysayers and the yayasayers, is what we call revitalization, which eventually means a more gradual and sustained change that is more context sensitive and that takes into consideration the current residents, as opposed to a sudden and abrupt change. And understanding the difference between these two phenomena will help community leaders and policymakers and promote sustainable investment and economic growth without a drastic change to the character of neighborhoods. Next. So to reiterate the differences between revitalization versus gentrification, I think it's important to understand that not all improvements equal gentrification. I think the way forward is incremental, sustained, and context sensitive. And I want to highlight that term a couple of times. And that form of investment in commercial and cultural revitalization will not dramatically change the social character. It will lead to some kind of change, but a gradual change that is more digestible by the social safety nets in our systems that we should have in place that should counterbalance such displacement, or any displacement that is to a certain extent, by with policy making and public investment, etc. And to mention a few strategies in the next slide that could drive this place keeping through equitable development and prevent gentrification while boosting community development. Well, we can start by knowing your neighbors, which I think is trivial, and saving the public domain, which our city does better than a few of its counterparts. But a very important one is providing renters, and by renters I mean residents and businesses, with the opportunity and financing to purchase their units and own a piece of their fabric. establishing community benefit agreements that also ensure the local residents benefit from the new developments in addition to the newcomers and the city dwellers in general, supporting locally owned businesses. We can create community investment trusts. And I think last but not least, making cultural investments that preserve the social vibrancy of the neighborhood, and hardwiring those into development agreements will go a long way. And I think Joaquin is going to summarize a few other principles that we have mentioned previously.
Yeah, that's right. So just to recap, the tactical urbanism is part of the story of this place, but it's not the exclusive tool. And we encourage city builders and professionals to approach tactical urbanism with a critical eye, and to pursue projects not simply because they have whimsy or fun or award appeal, but to support and encourage and build relationships with the communities that forged the place's significance before the development potential happened. Last slide talks about, and something we want to leave you with, is the 11 principles for creating great community places from public spaces. Really quickly, number 1, community is the expert. 2, create a place, not a design. It's about relationships. Number 3, look for partners. It takes a village. Number 4, you can see a lot just by observing use patterns, the way people do or don't use it. Number 5, have a vision. Instill pride in the community and the users. 6, lighter, quicker, cheaper. Test and retest. 7, triangulate, group things together so that people can meet and casually bump into each other. 8, they always say it can't be done. Obstacles are going to come. It's a great opportunity to educate authorities on the true value of place. 9, form supports function. Consult the community for programming, design accordingly. Money is not the issue. If we create enthusiasm, support is more likely to follow. And number 11, we are never, ever finished. It's an ongoing process. So in order to remain flexible, we have to create systems and structures that allow for that evolving nature of the community's needs. So thank you, everybody, for your attention. And that's a wrap.
There we go. Yay. Thank you. That's good. I'm loving the places you guys are all choosing just to see the potential in the city. I think is really interesting. So team 4, which is placekeeping.
Super. Thanks very much, Kevin. My name is Matt Andrews from IBI Group, and I'm pleased to introduce our group members. Anna Cassis of B&H Architects, Oliver Hurley High from Waterfront BIA, Pranetti Kulkarni of Steps Public Art, Derek Luck of Dream Industrial, and Matson Meir from the City of Markham. Our presentation topics included land acknowledgements, Indigenous placekeeping, diversity and inclusion, and engagement processes. Now I'll pass it over to Oliver.
Thanks. So we started our presentation on Indigenous placekeeping with this slide. Note, we are not experts. The original intent behind this statement on this slide, because we as a group were struggling with the topic because of its sensitive nature, focused on deep-rooted social problems that go far beyond benches, planting zones, and play structures. But as we continued to discuss the topic, we came to the realization that this statement, "we are not experts," had a broader reaching meaning that echoed throughout our presentation, because no one person is an expert at Indigenous placekeeping. It is only something that can be done properly through open and active engagement with local peoples and traditional knowledge keepers of the communities that we are working in. This became the connecting thread through our investigation into Indigenous placekeeping, as we repeated over and over again to ourselves, engagement, engagement, engagement. We started our presentation speaking about land acknowledgements and their importance in helping colonially based establishments have historically excluded Indigenous communities in the past, interrupt the ongoing narrative of exclusion, and convey respect for the traditional Indigenous territories and cultures. One of the most important learnings for us was not only about the importance of the land acknowledgement, but the personalization of the land acknowledgement to convey personal reflection, learning, and respect for the sentiments covered in the acknowledgement. What is Treaty 13? Who are the Wendat peoples? And what does "we are all treaty people" mean? This slide and land acknowledgement that you see at the beginning of most ULI events is a great starting place, and we encourage everyone to take time to reflect on their own relation to the land and to develop their own personalized acknowledgements, such as the one that Matt Andrews opened today's event with. Beyond the land acknowledgement, we also encourage people to take time and learn about the Indigenous peoples whose land we are on. ULI has some excellent resources on this, and there are many great resources across the web that can be accessed. One of the most impactful resources that we found was the Civic Indigenous Placekeeping and Partnership Building Toolkit from Evergreen and Future Cities, which had a section that recommended 150 different acts of reconciliation that could be taken as part of a learning journey. Some of the acts recommended included items ranging from learning the Indigenous words and teachings for the fish you catch on your next fishing trip, to learning the story of missing and murdered Indigenous women in our region and memorizing her name. Now I'll hand it over to Pranetti, who will speak specifically about Indigenous placekeeping.
Thanks, Oliver. So as Oliver mentioned, land acknowledgements are a very small step towards reconciliation. And in addition to the land, we must acknowledge the people, their culture, and stories of the past, present, and future. Next slide, please. When we are thinking about people, we also need to acknowledge that there are many different people in the city now. And here on this slide, you can see there are some charts that show the distribution of ethnocultural communities in Toronto according to income and neighborhoods. Marginalized communities experience a much higher rate of poverty than general population. And with some communities being 6 times more likely than white Torontonians to live in poverty. So on the next slide, we'll see some ULI statistics as well. Even when we analyze the ULI statistics regarding the race and ethnicity for the Americas and leadership positions by race, we see that there is unequal distribution. So this brings us to the next point, which is if we are increasingly designing spaces and cities for more and more diverse populations, it is only logical that we change our methods and think differently. This definitely requires an intention to re-examine engagement and design practices. So what does that mean? Next slide, please. So this brings us to placekeeping, which the earlier team also touched upon. So what placekeeping means is it prioritizes empathy, equity, and collaboration by utilizing the current resources of a community to help amplify the social, physical, and cultural aspects of its public spaces. This was defined by Movable, which is a placekeeping organization based in San Jose, California. What we believe is that placekeeping can be one of the first steps to start building the new path for engaging diverse populations and creating spaces that are inclusive and equitable. I will now hand it off to Anna, who's going to talk more about this.
Thank you so much, Pranetti. So now we're going to talk about Indigenous placekeeping. Let's dive into the definition. Have to realize that it took us few months to really grasp this term and its complexity. Indigenous placekeeping is an approach to design based on land stewardship that is centered around recognizing the rights of the landscape as a living being first, and considering our responsibilities to a place now and into the future. Indigenous placekeeping thinks beyond our immediate benefits and defines our relationship of reciprocity to all living things and systems and how they work together. Indigenous thinking differs from Western ways to understand the world. So therefore, when we find a definition like this one, it can seem very abstract and complex at the beginning. So let's start with the first sentence. Placekeeping is an approach to design based on land stewardship. Land stewardship means caring for a piece of land regardless of its ownership, taking into consideration ecological, economical, social, and cultural dimensions. This term closely relates with the concept of creating a place defined by project for public spaces. Let's move towards the concept of land stewardship centered on three main indigenous learnings. First, the concept of universal inclusivity that acknowledges the importance of the land and our equal position within the system. Second, the 7-generation principle that explains the importance of time, past, present, and future. And lastly, the concept of reciprocity, which means thinking beyond our immediate benefit, the importance of the circle, and as an understanding of natural cycles and complex systems. Universal inclusivity recognizes the rights of a landscape as a living being. Matthew Hickey describes universal inclusivity in a way that encompasses not just everyone, but everything. The human is no longer the center of the universe. It's unequal to the other species. He proposes a model in which we can reconcile our differences and overcome human-imposed hierarchies. He also suggests to place ourselves within the system as opposed to above the system. No person has an elevated position at a certain area of the circle. Now, let's talk about considering our responsibilities to a place now and into the future. The 7-generation principles is an emblematic of indigenous philosophy, ceremony, and natural law, and it has lived through the teachings and lifeways of many indigenous nations across the Turtle Island, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The 7-generation principles has also inspired contemporary thinking and policy on sustainability, meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations. In simple words, the 7-generation principle means that our actions will impact 7 generations. We are connected 3 generations behind to our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and 3 generations forward to our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The third learning is about the circle and system thinking. Many indigenous communities have a strong affinity with the circle because it symbolizes and resembles many cycles in nature. They also believe that the power of the universe works in circles, such as the shape of the sun or the moon. The medicine wheel has been used by generations of various Native American tribes for health and healing. All parts of the wheel are important and depend on each other in the circle of life. Nowadays, the idea of the circle has been translated to the definition of system thinking because linear processes have demonstrated to be limited, deficient, and unsustainable in time.
Thanks, Anna.
Now I pass it to Derek.
Thanks, Anna. The public participation spectrum can be of thin engagement from inform to thick engagement to empower, which is more interaction. Engagement can be thin when trying to engage a large number of people to get initial feedback. Engagement should be thick when looking to share diverse perspectives to build a shared understanding. Each project is different and has different objectives and reasons for engaging, as well as different phases of the projects that call for different techniques. Next slide, please. Inform is to provide the public with a balanced and objective information to assist them in understanding the problem, alternatives, and solutions. As examples, websites, public notices, and advertising are ways to inform the public. Next slide, please. Consult is to obtain public feedback on analysis, alternatives, and decisions. As examples, surveys, interviews, public meetings, and open houses with anyone who wishes to attend are ways to consult the public. Next slide, please. Involve is to work directly with the public throughout the process to ensure that public concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered. As examples, community mapping, scenario testing, citizens panels, and participatory budgeting are ways to involve the public. Collaborate is to partner with the public in each aspect of decision-making, including the development of alternatives and identification of preferred solutions. As examples, working groups, document co-creation, and large group meetings would be to work with the public. Next slide, please. Empower is to place a final decision-making in the hands of the public. Convention engagement focuses on the inform and consult side, but striving for more meaningful engagement results in supporting more of a two-way flow of information with emphasis on greater involvement, collaboration, and empowerment. As examples, citizens communities, citizens juries, and asset-based community development can be used to engage the public. And now Oliver would discuss placemaking strategy.
Thanks, Derek. So just to reiterate, the main theme of our presentation is engagement, engagement, engagement. And because of that, with our placemaking exercise, that's all we're going to focus on, is how do you engage the public in a way that is meaningful and can bring about the outcomes that the community wants, rather than defining the project first and then moving from there. Our location is Spadina Key. So Spadina Key is a pier located on the central waterfront. Most of the waterfront around it is developed, but this one particular key is mostly underutilized in its current purpose. It currently serves as underground parking within the key and connects to Marina Key, which is a currently used marina that juts out from it. It is a very important site within our waterfront because it is at the center of many, many different things, including being next to Billy Bishop Airport, Bathurst Quay and the Canadian Malting Silos, the Toronto Music Garden, HGO Park, and Harbourfront Centre. So it's a very prominent space to be left alone in its current state. I'll pass it to Matt to discuss why.
So why this side? Why Spadina Key? Well, it's one of the last undeveloped waterfront sites and is surrounded by high-density residential. It's a former industrial site, but it's not used as that anymore. We believe that it's currently underutilized, and compared to other public spaces along the Toronto waterfront, this undeveloped land can provide so much more to the local population. It's got a single purpose as boat access, both for cruise ships and for private boat owners, but that is only a very small section of the local population. As well, water is important to different cultural groups, such as Lake Ontario was a part of Indigenous trading route that spanned the entire Great Lakes waterway. As well, the first Toronto Pride Parade was on Hanlan's Point in 1970 across the water from Spadina Key. Now I'll pass it over to Pranethi.
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt spoke a bit about, who are the people we are looking to engage with through this process? So our potential stakeholders would be the Mississaugas of the Credit, other Indigenous groups in general that are across the city, private boat owners, users of the cruise industry, visitors to the BIA and the islands, local residents, and as Matt mentioned, other ethnic groups that have some importance of water in their culture. I'll now hand it off to Derek. Oh, sorry, Anna.
Thank you, Pranethi. So now we're going to talk about the how. Conventional engagement focuses on the inform and consult side. Normally, we strive for more meaningful engagement, supporting a two-way flow of information with an emphasis on greater involvement, collaboration, and empowerment. We propose a cyclical process using the idea of values as drivers for planning that we explained in our 3-hour workshop. And new methods relates with a cyclical process and new ways of engagement that combines power shifting, lived experiences, mutual learnings, reciprocity, and transformation from all the learnings of indigenous placekeeping. In our case studies, we found that using different tools helps reaching diverse audiences. So in the process for this study, we will suggest to use informed videos, infography, social media, printouts, presentations, site visits, public meetings, and the consult focus groups, online forums, social media again, workshops, and try to use as more tools as possible, because that's the way you reach the audience. Also, next slide. A few highlights from the case studies in our research are the importance to document the teachings and feedbacks into a series of communication tools, as well as use visual storytelling to report and summarize like all the beautiful outcomes of the engagement process. We love, for example, the initiative of the Toronto Island Master Plan in working with artists and graphic illustrators to create mood sketches, vision maps, and concepts. Now I hand it to Derek.
Derek.
Amy. Thanks, Anna. So what resources are needed? Scope. Recognizing the scope of the engagement will need to realistically reflect resources. Time. We need to ensure that adequate time is allowed for fulsome engagement of community needs. Cost. With the staff, money, external support to make these placemaking activities happen. And now I'll pass it to Oliver to discuss resources.
So finally, we're going to talk about when. The majority of placemaking processes are linear in their format, and we want to really emphasize how important it is to make the placemaking process, in this case, and many of our cases, circular, and think about them in that way, so that you consult with the community, engage with them, have outcomes that you test or implement, and then go right back to the drawing board as the community shifts and changes its needs for that space. So this would be our approach to a placemaking project at Spadina Key, and we just want to thank everyone. Over to the next group.
Very good. Yay, thank you. Last group. So we're going to be a few minutes past 7 o'clock. I know it already, but
hi, everyone. So my name is Shamir Panchal, and I will be introducing our group. And the topic for our team was sustainability and placemaking. Next slide, please. Yeah, and our team members were Anne James from Bousfields, Christina Glass from Hallmark, Jordana Wright from Activate Space, Rithi Haider from IBI Group, myself, and Swatika Anandan from the City of Toronto. So today we'll share some of our findings and research, and followed by some placemaking strategies for the site we chose, which is the East Harbour. To start our work, we took on the task of creating a land acknowledgement, which focused on the Dish with One Spoon treaty, which you've heard about already today. We felt that this treaty really provided a sort of powerful model for the type of society that we need to become. It centers around the concept of stewardship and the collective sharing of land and resources, which is really crucial for how we deal with sustainability. If you'd like to read more about that treaty, you can visit www.whos.land. So one of the main questions we kind of asked ourselves when doing this research was, how can placemaking address the ongoing climate crisis, which has already caused extreme weather, polar melting, flooding, forest fires, and drought around the world? As stakeholders in city building, we feel it's really crucial that we contribute to sustainable solutions in our placemaking, while also building cities and communities which are resilient to these changes. So there's no one solution, and instead we decided to really focus on the things that we were interested in, and we'll walk you through some of those ideas and kind of projects in the next few slides. So the first idea was this concept of rewilding the city. And that really looks at how can we reintroduce nature back into our cities. So nature and cities have always been seen as kind of odds at one another. And over the years, we've lost a lot of natural land, wildlife habitats as the city grew. But there are many benefits to rewilding our cities, not just for wildlife and the environment, but also for our own sense of well-being and community. So we looked at a few really great projects here locally in Toronto, which we can all visit, so in which you probably all know very well, such as the Don Valley Brickworks, the Meadowway, which is not constructed yet, and Tommy Thompson Park. And each of these projects really transforms a piece of derelict infrastructure or kind of scarred landscapes into new natural environments that can support local communities and have kind of huge impact and become part of the identity of Toronto. We also looked at some projects internationally, and through our research, we kind of found that public spaces offer a really unique opportunity to not only lessen our collective contributions to climate change, but also deal with climate change and its kind of imminent effects, such as flooding. So we looked at 4 different large public space projects. These include the Chulalongkorn Park in Bangkok, a project for a new stormwater reservoir and public park aimed at preventing flooding in the city of Bangkok. We also looked at the Baker Ripley Community Center in Houston. This is more of a piece of social infrastructure, which is aimed at providing emergency aid in times of natural disasters. And finally, Hunters Point South in Queens, New York, which transforms a 1-kilometer seawall into a flood protection park directly adjacent to kind of large affordable housing development. And lastly, closer to home, we looked at the Toronto Portlands, which is redevelopment of a former heavy industrial area. And this includes the naturalization of the entire mouth of the Don River and kind of the reestablishment of the wetland condition that existed almost 100 years ago in that site. So again, this is kind of this project is aimed at reducing the impact of flood risk through climate change, but also providing this amazing new public space for everyone in the community to enjoy. Another topic and aspect we looked at was adaptive reuse as related to sustainable placemaking. And this is really based on the concept that the greenest building is one that's already there. So this focuses on the building, but it also focuses on how existing buildings can sort of foster social resilience by providing space for community initiatives and programs, both long and short term. So this could include strategies such as, working with local community groups and neighborhood champions to include uses that protect protect biodiversity, while also increasing access to locally grown food and food production. This also includes making new spaces for communities to take the lead and act quickly and responsibly in ways that can sometimes be difficult with new city building. So an example of this is a pop-up kitchen initiative, which can leverage affordable commercial kitchen spaces in these kind of existing buildings, such as churches or warehouses or factories, and also partner with urban agricultural organizations and others to provide local food relief during the pandemic, which was really useful and an amazing thing that happened over the last 2 years. And now I'll pass it over to Riti.
So following up on adaptive reuse and how sustainable it is, embodied carbon is the carbon dioxide emissions associated with materials and construction processes throughout the whole life cycle of a building or infrastructure. This includes any CO2 created during the manufacturing of building materials, material extraction, transferred from the manufacturer, and the construction practices used. Embodied carbon is a carbon footprint of a building or infrastructure project before it becomes operational. On the screen, you can see the drivers of embodied carbon. A carbon-intensive structural system, carbon-intensive envelope systems, the floor area below grade, the parking dimensional impact on structural grids, and stackbacks and transfer beams. By utilizing the existing building and foundation, it reduces the amount of embodied carbon on the proposed developments. As cities get denser and more populated, they're often dominated by impervious surfaces and lack green spaces. There are various strategies and solutions to overcome this issue, which shows a city's resiliency. Active Teal was a great example of how the City of Toronto was adaptive and resilient during the pandemic. Connecting to our previous group's presentation, this is a key example of tactical urbanism. It's a city-led approach that was temporal and responsive in the sense that car-oriented streets were transformed for active transportation on the weekends to allow people to exercise. This is also a very effective solution for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This leads us to St. Catherine Street in Montreal. The closure allows for countless terraces to open up along the street, as well as several special events, including street sales and art exhibits. The pedestrian zone has been activated with various overhanging features. The first successful pedestrianized street is the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. The features that help pedestrianize this promenade are narrow roads, curb sidewalks leading to stores, as well as more retail and outdoor dining on the ground floor of parking garages and mixed housing developments. In the pandemic, this street was also resilient by removing curbs to make room for fairs and farmer markets. We had a great panel. As you can see on the screen, our panel discussion brought together panelists who advocate for sustainability and placemaking at different levels. All of them conveyed one big message. The time to act is now, be it at the local level or at the policy level, and change can only be brought by being brave. While the challenges of our time, climate change and resilience, health, equity, and inclusion are indeed global in scale, the most effective solution can only be found at the local level. We looked at 2 precedences, King's Cross in the UK and Nordhaven in Denmark, which took that step of being brave, both in its own way of future-proofing and trying to set precedent that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. One is led by the developer and the other is led by the city to create a net zero sustainable place. While these 2 may appear to be top-down initiatives, they are more circular, more collaborative, more committed to address the issue of climate change, and a very sustained effort to make a difference. Those developments respect their environment, its past and its future. Creating a community with long-term future and minimum impact on the environment has been a guiding principle at both instances. Long-term sustainability has been factored into everything, from adaptively reusing heritage buildings and promoting energy efficiency to encouraging green transport, sustainable building design, and supporting social and cultural diversity. In an effort to reduce the environmental impact of their buildings, sustainable and recycled materials have been used wherever possible, with efficiently constructed floor plates. Both these case studies have taken efforts to improve climate conditions and show how cities can help to improve climate conditions without losing out on quality of life, welfare, and democracy.
So I will now talk a bit about our East Harbor placemaking strategy and how we chose the site. Through our initial discussions in the program, a theme emerged for us about the topic of environmental sustainability, looking to the past, present, and future. As we learned more through the other groups that were doing presentations and our own research, we really resonated with the 7th generation principle that was just outlined in a bit more detail by Team 4. We also found that we were naturally inclined to look at sites with our topic along the Don Valley and the waterfront, acknowledging the asset that natural features have and the history in the land of these areas. In particular, the East Harbor site was interesting to us as we had attended a walking tour, fortunately enough, hosted by Ken Greenberg. And what we found here was that bringing together people and the environment is really a key theme that emerged in how we would want to approach the placemaking strategy for the site. We also had the opportunity at the end of April while we did the tour to look directly across the Don Valley to East Harbor. And I believe there was a comment at some point of, what is the placemaking strategy going to be for that site in light of the MZO that was announced. So for a bit of context, East Harbor is a 38-acre site and has been announced as a transit-oriented community released in April this year. It will provide zoning permissions for 4,300 residential units in addition to 50,000 jobs. And it also includes the East Harbor start on the New Ontario line, as well as connecting to local transit routes. We could just go to the next slide. Thank you. In our approach, we established that we need to create an explicit pro-equity agenda to our creative placemaking efforts and central themes, being the environment and people who reuse the space. So environmental and sustainability is an exciting topic, but it can also be a bit scary and discouraging at times, which was discussed in our panel discussion, where we had some great experts. And as Rainey mentioned, those kind of calls to action about being brave, and that the time to act is now. Looking at a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach would be key to our approach and would offer great benefits in developing an integrated solution that will work on the ground, drawing upon each of the different areas of expertise and moving beyond the standard practice of consultation towards true engagement and partnership. Equally important is seeking input from local communities to tap into their knowledge and give them a chance to shape the design. Communities can offer useful input into what existing green infrastructure should be kept, the best places for new connections, routes and linkages, and what additions they would like to see in their area. This also goes beyond addressing needs, but also fosters a sense of community pride and ownership in a place. We also want to acknowledge that an iterative and circular approach to placemaking and placekeeping should be contemplated, especially for a project of this scale. And something that we've seen in the past couple of years is that there have been a number of changes to the plan for this site in particular. As we learned a little bit more about community engagement and really took away some great lessons from our colleagues in Montreal, we wanted to ask some central questions about for whom are we trying to create benefit when we're implementing our creative placemaking strategies, who's being left out, and how can we again move beyond the consultation to engagement and partnership. So on the kind of right image here, we have Museum of Possibilities from Daily to Leisure, which looked to kind of open end in an art exhibit, ask people what all the possibilities could be and what they would want to see. And this goes beyond our standard consultation process that includes a development notice, a public meeting, and that type of format. We've also seen some examples in the city of Toronto using interim uses such as Stacked Market, Edit at East Harbour, and Demotaphone to go beyond those kind of standard questions. What do you like, dislike, but really what are all the opportunities that are possible in the long term or short term on this site? Adaptive reuse was really a key theme that came out in our presentation, and as Ruti spoke about, in Shamir as well, the benefit of having an existing building. So, we've seen the benefits of adaptive reuse across the city, in particular, how flexible policy outcomes, such as in the King Spadina and King Parliament area, have facilitated a unique character and connection to the city's history that can produce sustainable communities that go beyond just environmental sustainability, such as Bordeaux and Richmond. So the value of adaptive reuse really goes beyond what value we can find from a social or sort of from an environmental standpoint, as well as a social and government perspective. One key takeaway from our Montreal trip was that what is the culture of being a Montrealer, which was difficult for our local experts to pinpoint, and our rebellious nature emerged as a key theme, which works by harnessing almost a dissatisfaction in the city to prompt responses and community action. We've seen that energy in Toronto in some instances, in particular, like the Save the Foundry movement that arose just on the west side of the Don. And here's just a quick example of the Edit design festival that took place in this former soap factory on the site. Moving on. In terms of placemaking and mobility, the redevelopment plans to incorporate a robust cycling and pedestrian network connecting to open spaces for easy mobility would help facilitate these connections in the open spaces. In our placemaking plan, we recommend that mid-block connections be utilized to active public spaces where possible, create more places for sustainable play, and also look to examples in the city such as graffiti alley, laneway activations, underpass park, and integrating elements of color, music, and light. Next slide. We know that the site is challenged in terms of the environmental sensitivities with the proximity of the Don River. Looking across to Corktown Commons, we can see the opportunity to use a floodplain protection landform to create a really special place. Next slide. Nature-based placemaking builds on a community's natural assets and associated recreation, ecosystem services, economic and broader well-being benefits, collectively to bolster community vibrancy. This can happen on multiple scales, from the individual and household level to larger community levels. It also creates space that provide opportunities for realizing the experience that we desire when we consider the social, economic, and ecological aspects that we make into a community. Just for some ending notes, I'll go to the last slide here, which is a sketch that, a mapping sketch that was produced reflecting the MZO on the site. So what we've seen as a key takeaway is that community will exist within spaces, kind of regardless of what happens, but what we can do as architects, designers, and planners and developers is facilitate a holistic approach to foster a resilient community and really focus on improving that community and creating it where possible in consideration of the past, present, and future of these areas. Looking to this site and the broader opportunities that will come across in our individual practices, I'll end our portion of the presentation here with a call to action that we heard in our panel discussion by Dan Leeming, that we should all be brave. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. So I know we've covered a lot quickly. I know question. We don't have time for questions. You can clap. You can all clap. But we are going to post the recording of the session, and we will also put together all of the presentations for people. So for those of you who want to spend some more time with this material, you'll be able to. It'll all be on the ULI website for Curtner, and be available. I will also say I was kind of wondering about the spaces, and I think between the Forks of the Don, the Lower Junction Triangle, Spadina Key, and East Harbor, we've got a bunch of places with a bunch of real potential and possibilities in this city. And I'm happy to say I think we have a group of people who are willing and have learned a lot and can think about these spaces and placemaking in them in very in new and interesting ways. So I said we've done 8 months worth of this, and it's been a lot, and everyone's worked really hard, and I want to thank them. They'll all get their certificates soon, so we are officially done, except for the final survey and suggestions for what we do next year, which is my last reminder. Curtner's been, this is I think year 6, and we'll continue it again in the fall. We are in the process still of looking at what we want to do. We want to ask this year's group as well as the prior to see and look for suggestions and ideas of what we want to think about and how we want to do it. But the call for participants will go out in probably September. And so encouraging people, for anyone who's currently watching and know kind of mid-career people anywhere in the ULI network of networks, and as well across community groups, because one of our big things, and even if you notice some of the presenters, we have people from various community groups involved as well, which I think is an important part of the connections that Curtner helps establish amongst everybody. So, so that will be going out as well. With that, I took 3 extra minutes of your time, so everybody did really well. Sorry we don't have time for questions, but most of you should know the people who presented. If not, you can track them down or track me down, and we're happy to talk about this more. And as I said, we'll post the information, the slides, and the recording of this, so it's available for people to look at as well. So thank you all. Have a good evening. I now have to rush and go teach a class. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Well done, everyone. Bye-bye.